Mr. Jha, I'm sure that you've been part of many budgets. I'm sure you've inputted into this, and you've been at the receiving end of both, bouquets as well as challenging feedback. What, in your opinion, are the three things that a typical budget considers, and what would you change differently now that you've been away from the government for some time?
See, a budget, like a household budget, is basically a matching of resources with expenditures. So first step in making a budget is you find out what are the likely resources you're going to receive in terms of both tax resources, non-tax revenues, etc. So it's very much like a household budget. As in a household, you'd first see what your income is, then you determine what your expenditure is. So this is exactly the same. You find out, you guess as to what your tax revenues are likely to be, what is the growth, etc., and what your non-tax revenues will be. Now, the basic question in the budget is whether your assumptions of your revenue raising are accurate or not. Now, very often, the tendency is to overestimate revenues because you want a larger budget. It suits people to say that, my budget size is X instead of X minus 10 or whatever. So that is the first step where I think there should be honesty in essentially finding out, assessing the revenue, what the revenue is going to be. Now, overall, if one looks at the budget, see, there is a lot of, Mr. Bhattacharya mentioned, there's a lot of hoo-ha about the budget secrecy, and, many people said their livelihoods depend on analyzing the budget, etc. So, but basically, if you look at the entire picture, a budget typically is about 12 to 14% of GDP. See, so essentially what the budget is presenting to the nation is government's plan of expenditure of equivalent to 12 to 14% of GDP. So it's not a huge sum of money that we are looking at. But what is very relevant for the budget exercise is that along with the annual financial statement, which, as Mr. Bhattacharya says, should be kept on one side, and the plans and programs of the government should be kept separately, is essentially in the budget, the government lays out its various policies. Now, in the old days before GST came in, there used to be a lot of speculation about what are going to be the excise duties, because on that depended the fortunes of many companies. If the excise duties were lowered, they prospered. If they were hiked, then they did not prosper. So all that, of course, with GST now, so that part of the secrecy is gone, because that is now handled by the GST Council. But even then, we have the income tax rates. But income tax rates also now, the secrecy has gone out of it, because you have basically over the last many years, the tax rates have not been changed. You have exemption limits which have been altered, but by and large, the tax rates have been constant. What Mr. Chidambaram had introduced in his dream budget, that those rates have been there for the next many years, and only the exemption limits have been changed. So that, I think, as I said, the main thing in the budget is your assumptions of what kind of revenues you're going to raise. And the third point here is that, people think that, okay, if the budget size is, 25 lakh crores or whatever, then that's the kind of money that is available to the government to deploy in whatever field it wants to. That again is incorrect, because there are many committed expenditures which the government has to incur. You have, for instance, you have defense expenditure, you have salaries expenditure, you have interest payments expenditure, you have some centrally sponsored schemes expenditure, you have central schemes expenditure. So basically, if you remove all these committed expenditures, which you cannot really, stop, then the headroom available to the finance minister to play around with, as I said, we started off life with 12 to 14% of GDP. That gets reduced considerably after that. So finance ministers are really able to play around with maybe half or even less than half of that. So that is the importance of the budget. If you really want to cut it down to its bare bones, then the budget is not really, the annual financial statement is not really such a great thing. But what is really great is the policy statements that are sort of camouflaged in the budget speech. That is the important thing.